What I'd like to speak with you about today is innovation, which is obviously a topic on many people's minds. And if you're in the industry you're in, it's got to be a topic that's very high on your minds. And it's pretty obvious why everyone is interested in innovation. The promise of innovation is pretty powerful. I mean, everybody, if you look at these kind of data, these kind of growth rates of companies like Google or Apple, you don't have to be a financial expert to realize that's a really good growth trend. And that's driven by innovation. And that's what we want. That's why companies spend on R&D, and that's why they all think about how to become more innovative. That's what they want to be. So how do you get that? Right? How do you start to become a really innovative organization? And the reality is, so I talked about the promise. The reality is, and I've done this quite a while, and I've been in many companies over many years, most innovation initiatives fail. It's really frustrating. So innovation at one level is so exciting, and everybody jumps into it, and then like a few years later, it's like they've given up. Most innovation initiatives fail. Larger companies will say, we tried, we did it, we couldn't do it, so now we're just going to do acquisitions, or we'll do something else. And I don't think that has to be the case. Because I think there's some really simple, clear reasons why innovation initiatives fail and what you can do about them. And they fail for three basic reasons. They fail first because companies don't craft the right innovation strategies. They don't think about innovation they don't think about it strategically. They start with a general idea of innovation is good, and that it is true, but they don't get beyond the specifics. And obviously innovation is a good thing. I've never heard any organization or any person say they want to be the opposite. I've never heard anybody say they want to be inert. Everybody wants to be innovative. But you have to go beyond that. Like how? What kind of innovation? How is innovation going to drive value? The second reason it fails, and if you don't have a strategy, nobody knows what to execute. The second reason innovation initiatives fail is they don't build what I call the innovation system. Those are the capabilities needed to execute your innovation strategy. So too often what happens when companies decide that they want to be innovative, they go out, they'll hire a consulting firm, they'll get a list of best practices, and they put those in. That never works. Because what's a best practice for Apple is not necessarily a best practice for you. It's a system. You have to build the system so the parts fit together and are uniquely suited to your organization. So this is strictly bespoke tailoring when it comes to designing innovation systems. And then the third, and it's often forgotten, but it's really powerful, is the culture. So you can build the best system in the world, but if you don't create the right sets of behaviors, you're not going to be innovative. Okay? So three things you've got to do as leaders. These are your leadership tasks. You got to create the strategy, you got to design the system, and you've got to build the culture. So let's talk briefly about some details around those. Okay? So let's talk about creating the strategy. Let's start with this word, innovation. As I said, great word, everybody wants to be innovative. Some things are obviously innovative. The big breakthroughs, the things that make the headlines, obvious. Okay, the Wright brothers' first plane got it. That was a great invention. The first genetically engineered drug, the first microprocessor, the iPad. But if we limit ourselves to thinking about innovation as just these headline-grabbing things, we miss about 99% of what innovation's about. And some things are not so obvious. In fact, some things aren't even new. So let me give you my favorite example. So that's a head of lettuce, right? That's not new. Okay, lettuce was foraged by our prehistoric ancestors, our Neanderthals, right? And then it was actually cultivated. It was first cultivated by the ancient Egyptians, 3500 BC. So if an ancient Egyptian went into a supermarket in downtown Copenhagen, they'd recognize the lettuce. Okay, the lettuce is probably a little bigger today, probably a little greener, a little genetically more robust, in some places genetically modified, but it's lettuce. They would know what it is and they'd know what to do with it. Nothing new about lettuce. Plastic bags, nothing new about plastic bags. Plastic bags have been around since about the late 1940s or so. So you get two old things, one really old, one sort of old. And we put them together and we got that. Right? Now you say, well, what's the big deal about that? It's lettuce in a bag. Well, actually, that led to a 30% increase in lettuce sales. Right? It took what was essentially a moribund market for a commodity product that sold for lettuce is very cheap and sold at a very high price premium. In fact, the next time you go to a supermarket, what I invite you to do is go to the bagged section and look. And I think in Denmark you have to do this. There's always the price per unit of the ingredient. Look at the price per kilo of the bagged, and then walk about 2 meters over to where the heads are and look at the price per kilo of the whole head, and you'll see a dramatic difference in what you're paying. And then if you really want to have fun, think about the time it takes you to, because actually what's the value add of the bagged lettuce? It saves you the incredibly arduous task of taking the head of lettuce, chopping it, and washing it. Okay, so think about the time it takes you to do that, divide by the difference, and you have the kind of billable rate you're charging your family for your time to get the bagged lettuce. And most of us prefer to get the bagged lettuce, the data shows, right? So that's innovation. It doesn't have the kind of whiz-bang, headline-grabbing, aura of some new digital product, but that's innovation. Tremendous commercial innovation. It unlocked value that was there. And some innovations are not even about product or technology at all. So think about Netflix. Think about the original Netflix model of sending DVDs to you, to your house. There was very little technology. There was some software to help you pick, the search engines and to help you pick, get your recommendations. But in essence, that wasn't really too fancy. They used, they take DVDs, they stick them in an envelope, they lick the envelope and mail them. In most countries, the postal systems are a few hundred years old. There's nothing new there. Technology-wise, it's all about the business model. Think about IKEA, which has grown dramatically throughout the world. I mean, there's not a lot of technology. Yes, they use technology for sure, but that's not the driving factor. That's not the hard part. It's the business model. These are all business model innovations. Or think about Uber, the taxi company. There's not, yes, there's an app and it helps you find a driver or the driver to find you. But again, it's not particularly complicated technologically. That's not a technological breakthrough. It's a business model breakthrough. Ryanair is a business model innovation. There's nothing new about Ryanair. The airline industry's been giving terrible service for years. Ryanair's just figured out a way to get lots of us to do it at a lower price and make money doing it. It's purely a business model innovation. So we have to think about innovation in terms of, when we say innovation, what are we going after and what's our strategy? And I've created a very simple typology of categorizing innovations into just 4 basic types, depending on the extent to which they involve a technological change and the extent to which they involve a business model innovation. Right? So the routine innovation is that type of innovation which builds on your existing technological competencies and supports your business model. So think about examples like, a next generation microprocessor for Intel or a new wide-body jet by Boeing. Those are things they know how to do technologically, operationally, and they know how to make money doing it. It fits their business model. You could think about a type of innovation which does not involve a lot of technological challenge for you, but does challenge your business model. And you'll often hear this word disruptive innovation that's used, an overused word. Actually, what it means is essentially a pure business model innovation. So think about things like open source software. So like Linux as an open source. That's a different business model than say a Microsoft that charges, or the taxi service that I mentioned before, Uber, or even IKEA. Those are disruptive innovations in the sense they're purely about the business model. At the opposite quadrant, you have what I call radical innovation, which involves a lot of new technology requiring your organization to develop new technological competencies, but doesn't really change your business model. In fact, it supports your business model. So if you think about when biotechnology first came on the scene for most pharmaceutical companies, it was different technologically. It involved a lot of new learning, building new skills, say developing understanding of molecular biology and protein chemistry, and hiring lots of types of people that you didn't have before, and it tapping into new bodies of knowledge. But in essence, for the vast majority of pharmaceutical companies, it was all about supporting their existing business model. It was about creating clinically differentiated drugs that they could charge a price premium for. In fact, I'd argue biotechnology has just reinforced or amped up the existing business model of pharmaceutical companies to this point. And then you could think about innovation that is kind of both. I call it architectural. It's a fairly radical technological change, but it also involves or requires a significant change in your business model. So let's go back to the pharmaceutical example, personalized medicine, or some kind of more tailored medicine. Clearly, to get there, and we're moving there, but it still involves a lot of technological innovation and scientific progress. Real challenge. Lots of new technological capabilities organizations need to create. But that's only half the story, because then there's the question of how do we make money doing that? And that's a different value proposition and different way of capturing value that I think companies are still working out. So that would be an architectural innovation. And innovation in all four quadrants can be profitable and can be helpful. And so lots of profit is made in routine innovation, but long-term growth typically comes from operating outside that routine quadrant. And one of the big challenges organizations have is most of us are set up to innovate inside that routine quadrant. I call that, if you're a sports fan, your home field advantage, or if you're an indoor sport fan, your home court advantage. That's where you are comfortable playing. That's your strength. You understand how to do it, and you understand how to make money doing it. And the vast majority of organizations that I ask about where they tend to put their money, and if you think about the resource allocation of the portfolio, and I don't know if you're different, but most organizations say we do it in our home field. Are you different than that, or if you did a quick? Probably the same, right? So there's reasons for that. There's forces in the organization which will, even when we say we want to try to innovate outside that home field, that push us back in that direction. Right? We have a whole set of ways that we look for projects, a whole set of ways we evaluate programs, a whole set of ways we develop things, select things, etc., that actually sometimes inadvertently drive us back to that quadrant, even when we don't want to be. So a first step in creating an innovation strategy is to ask, when we say we want to be innovative, what do we mean? Where do we want to? What's the balance of these types of innovation? And it's okay. It is completely okay if you say, for us, innovation is all about being routine. That's okay. If you work it through and think that's your best long-term growth prospect. But it's equally okay if you say that we have to innovate outside that home court. There's not a formula. I'm often asked, what's the right balance? It varies by company. If you think about Google is growing 30, 40% in their core advertising business, and that business has a lot of growth potential, they should be putting a lot of money into routine. But they don't put all their money into routine. They're still exploring outside that home court. So the first step to think through from your strategy is, where do we want to be innovating? What's the right balance for us? And that will help you create your focal priorities, and will also help build your resource allocation strategy, because the thing that often happens is companies say we want to be, we see opportunities, say, to be disruptive. But unless that's part of the strategy, those programs, those proposals, those ideas, they never get on the radar screen. They're kind of filtered out too early, so you'll never execute that strategy. So first step, clarify. You got to use the strategy as a map. The second step, then, is you've got to design the system to execute the strategy you've just articulated. So if you want to innovate outside that home court, then you've got to make sure you have a system that is capable of finding and creating and selecting those innovations. And I think of innovation systems as having three basic things they have to do well. You have to be able to search for new ideas and problems. You have to be able to synthesize ideas from different sources, that is, form the ideas, conceptualize them, and then you have to be able to select. You have to be able to search, synthesize, and select. And that's your system. That's the kind of key functions that you have to go after. So the final piece is create the culture. And let me ask a question here. How many of you want to work in an innovative culture? Everybody does. So tell me 3 things or 4 things you think are characteristic of innovative cultures. We'll get some volunteers. What do you think? What does an innovative culture look like? Exciting. It's got to be very exciting. Okay, what else? Risk. Okay, go ahead. Curiosity and openness, right. Fun. They should be fun. Anything else? Sorry? Empowerment. Okay, great. These all sound like really good things. So then why don't we see more innovative cultures? I mean, here's an analogy. If you told me, if suddenly there was a, like, let's say, medical science has found miraculously that ice cream was really good for you. Like, the more ice cream you eat, the longer you live. I, for one, would be piling my plate with ice cream. We'd all be piling our plates with ice cream, right? Very few people, and there's no, and lactose intolerance goes away, right? So it's like, whoa. It's a good thing, and it tastes good, and it's good for us. You just described a whole bunch of things that taste good. I can't imagine somebody saying, I want to work in a dull environment. I don't want to be empowered. I want to work in an environment where curiosity is quiet. These are all things we want. So why don't we see it? Is there more to what innovative cultures are about? That is there something else about being innovative that makes it more challenging? And I'm going to show you a slide that has some of the things you've had on one side, but I think there's more to innovative cultures than all the things you mentioned. Although I would agree 100% with every single comment that was made, we need those things, right? We need cultures which are risk-taking. We want openness. We want curiosity. We want people to be collaborative. We want all those things. We need those things. That's the ice cream. Unfortunately, we need something else. We need lots of other things which don't taste as good. So it's like you can have your ice cream, but turns out you got to pour cod liver oil on it or something, right? Right? So I got ice cream I like, cod liver oil I don't like. I'm not sure whether I want these two things together. And that's what we're learning about innovative cultures. That, we need everything on your left side there, right? Tolerance for failure, willingness to experiment, collaborative, freedom to speak up, flat, etc. But you also, if you look deeply at innovative cultures, there's a tough side to them. If you go inside Amazon, very innovative company, incredibly high standards of competence. So we tolerate failure, we do not tolerate incompetence. They're highly disciplined. Are we willing to experiment? Yes. We cut off bad ideas pretty quick. As soon as we figure out there's none of these log rolling and projects keep going. They're very collaborative, extremely high levels of individual accountability, very high levels of accountability. Companies like, and I've been associated with just a number of startup companies, which I would think of as innovative. I mean, we unfortunately terminate people all the time who are just not up to the game. We learn as we go who can play the game and who can't be. And we're not mean-spirited about it, but we hold people very accountable for their individual performance. You can take risks. You can definitely take risks, thoughtful risks, but you're still held accountable for them. And what we try to do is attract people who in some sense don't care, right? Who say things like, this is what I want to do, and I will stake my job on it. And I'm like, okay, I like that person. That's a person I want in my organization. Because they're willing to take the risk, but they're willing to take personal risk in it. And in a lot of organizations, we don't want to take personal risk, right? We want openness. We want the willingness to speak up. That's great. We want the freedom to criticize. Terrific. But if you live in one of those cultures, you better have some tough skin, because it doesn't just go one way. It's not like you get to criticize. These are environments, and I've sat in on many, they are brutally frank. They are brutally frank. And again, it's not in the, I don't think one has to be mean-spirited. I don't want to imply that these are mean cultures. It's just that people are really clear about that's a bad idea. They don't couch it in corporate speak about that's an idea that maybe has opportunities for improvement, right? It's that idea is terrible. And let me tell you 5 reasons why your idea is terrible. Boom, 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 boom. That's it. And now you can debate it. But there's no ambiguity, and they're tough environments. And I've sat through many meetings in these, and they're not for everyone. And they're flat, but they also have very strong leadership. That is, leaders are setting a kind of guiding vision about where to go. So, and it's not decision-making by consensus. Leaders are relying on the organization, the kind of foment of people disagreeing and debating to learn. So decision-making is not an event. It's a process. And the leaders are listening very carefully because they're using the foment of the debate and the discussion, and sometimes the tension, as a way to learn more deeply about the problem. And there's no ambiguity about the leaders making key decisions, and they're setting clear directions in which people can go. So I think what we're learning about innovative cultures, they're paradoxical. At one hand, there's a lot of things that are, I think we all like. They're the ice cream side of it. The other hand, we're learning it's not enough. There's another side which for many of us doesn't taste as pleasant, but they're equally important. And you need both of these in the right balance to be innovative. And I think one challenge for all organizations is, are we really ready for this? We're ready for the left side, but are we ready for the right side and what that implies? And not all organizations are. And by the way, I don't fault anybody who says, I don't really want to work in one of those organizations. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think as an organization, you have to be clear, are we going to do this or not? And I don't think you can go halfway.